Okay, students, in our last video, we looked at how a collision can sometimes be different on objects that we get from other places, such as fab or asset packs, or that we import or download from the internet, like these two couches here. So I want to go over quite a bit about collision in this video. The first is the idea that every object can have its collision on or off, but more accurately, it can have different types of collision. So as I look over here in the details panel and scroll down till I get to collision, which is right here, we can see some basic collision presets. We have can character step up on, which is if this is something small, this makes sure that you can walk over it easily, like stairs. And then if we look at collision presets, right now we're on default. And if I click it, you can see we have lots of options. For most of our early projects, we're going to be dealing with no collision and block all. Overlap all is what trigger boxes are. Basically, the collision triggers an event, but it does not stop movement or overlaps, hence overlap all. And eventually you'll get to stuff like blocking dynamic objects, ignoring only the pawn, or potentially we could have custom, so like it can only block the character while not blocking enemies, stuff like that. These are useful ways to make invisible walls and all sorts of stuff like that. So if I switch to no collision and hit play, you'll see that I can go ahead and walk right through this object. So this can be a quite easy way to make fake platforms, as, you know, think Roblox trick platforms and stuff like that. But usually I would advise having some sort of marker so that the player can learn the pattern or learn that a certain color means that something falls through. Otherwise, it's kind of just bad game design. Now, if we look at the couch, I can absolutely change its collision to, for example, be no collision so that we can walk through it. But that doesn't solve the problem of how to step on it. Now, what we could do is make it have no collision and then put an invisible block or a blocking volume that has the collision we want in it. But we can also look at how to fix its collision. So what we need to do there is we have to get to the static mesh editor menu, if you will. We can get there a couple ways. You can get there by going to the static mesh sort of little symbol here in the lower right hand corner, or if you navigate to where it lives in your content browser. Either one of these, if you double click on it, it will open that window. Again, I'm pretty zoomed in here, so I'm going to zoom out. And here we can actually have a whole collision drop down, which does a bunch of things. And I can click show and have it show me different types of collision. So I can say show the simple collision. And here is that collision we saw in the player collision view in the engine. It's basically a slightly more complicated box. Now, if I click on show and I instead ask it to show me complex collision, you will see I get basically exactly the object as it is modeled as a collision. Well, that seems pretty useful. So what we can do is I can scroll all the way down here on the details panel, and we're again looking for the collision section. I also like to just type the word complex up here in search because that's the name of the specific setting we're looking for. And it's right here, collision complexity. So right now it's set to project default. So we have an option here for simple and complex. Use the simple as complex, or the one we're looking for, use complex as simple. Basically, use the complex collision as how the player is going to interact with this. If I hit save, and we close and go back in here, now I got to remember I still had this set as no collision, so we'll put it back as block all. If we look on player collision, we will now actually see the couch. And not only the couch, but all these little details, like I'll be able to step up on this cushion. As you can see. Let's see if I can even get my foot, and there we go, on that little cushion. Now, there is one important downside to this. You cannot use what we just did, complex as simple, with moving objects. So anything that you want to be a physics object that rolls around or that you can walk into, or anything that moves. So if you wanted to use this as one of our moving platforms for the parkour game, this is not a good enough solution. So there's another solution. I'm going to use this one as the example. We're going to go into this sofa. Once again, we can see under show, its simple collision is sort of a big box, and its complex collision is the couch. I'm going to turn off complex for now. Now, in our collision drop-down box here, I can remove collision, which I'm going to do. Getting rid of that old one. And we got some options here. These let us build collisions. That one that we just deleted is probably somewhere in here. Stuff like box, this will build us a really simple, even simpler than we had collision. And I could edit those and move those around, but I'm looking to just generate something simple. So here's 16 DOP, or data point, and that's pretty much where we were. So what I'm going to do is remove, and instead I'm going to come down here and use auto convex collision, which is going to open this tab down here on the right side. So convex is basically whenever we have something that is hollow in some way, like how this couch has the place that we sit. Holes are how many cubes it's going to use to sort of generate the space. Max hull verts is how many vertices make up sort of those cubes. So obviously 16 is more than a cube's 8, but it's basically the 3D shape that's going to make this up. And finally, hull precision is how many voxels they're going to use to make it as accurate as possible. So basically, they calculate a million little 3D pixels to figure out the shape. Be careful with these sliders. The higher you go, the higher processing power it takes, and the higher chance that you crash. I usually find pulling the top and bottom up to about where the hull verts is a good starting point, and then you hit apply, let it calculate, and we see what we get. So that was without me removing any time. That was in real time here, and we can see we got a relatively couchy shape. You can see the back end of it here, shape-wise, sort of tilts a little bit, which isn't perfect. I'm going to try to remove this collision, and I'm going to go a little higher on all of them, and do it again. Again, that was without me moving time. Not too bad. It also doesn't look too different from the last result, but this looks good to me. It is super important that you save after this. Now, for certain objects, things like tubes, you may have to specifically build collision in another program to make it actually be hollow. But this should make this object quite usable. And as you can see, it's not perfectly couch like shaped, but to our player's feet, it will react as if it does. This object can now be moved around and can be animated, and the player can jump on it, etc. And we can, also give it physics or anything else. So that's how you fix it. And also, it fixed it for all further uses. So if we look at this sofa, it's not just fixed for the one in here, it's fixed for everyone from now on.